Hi everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Outside the Box. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about things that matter to us, like cutting-edge conspiracy theories and international and domestic politics. I'm Erik Perez, and I have with me this week Andrew Hull and Spencer Lee. Sadly, Daxton couldn't make it this week, so we're going on without him.
Aww.
So, is there anything interesting happening with you two recently?
I got my car impounded, so that's fun.
It's pretty troubling.
That sucks.
So,
it's all good.
with that recent discovery that your car has been impounded, I have a question for you. Would you rather end all wars or end world hunger?
Honestly, I feel like ending world hunger would end a lot of the wars by byproduct, honestly. I'd go with that. Like, hunger is at the root of a lot of the wars. Like, look at the conflicts in, for example, like Sudan. A lot of that is driven by food scarcity.
It's true. That's true.
Plus, people, when they're hangry, they like to start wars.
Okay, but
so
actually,
we should just distribute some Snickers.
That's a conspiracy theory in and of itself. 9/11 was created because someone was hangry.
Dude.
How about you, Andrew? What would you do specifically? Would you end all wars or would you end world hunger?
I mean, I think I'd end world hunger. Like, even if it doesn't stop all wars, like, I think that you end, like, a reasonable amount of suffering, which is probably good. I agree with Spencer that by product you'll probably end a lot of wars. But, like, if you end all wars, like, then there's still going to be people suffering. There's still going to be people suffering in Hungary. So, I think
Hungary, or, like, the country, or, like
the country.
Oh,
no, I'm
sweet.
just kidding. No, just ending world hunger, in my opinion, is the better option.
Okay. How about, I feel like we all have a certain mindset when it comes to war, that it's guns and shootings and blowing things up. How about war, like war on terrorism and the war on drugs? What if that was also, I just want to remind you that that's also encompassed within wars itself. What if there's a war on hunger? Then would you effectively end the war, then the hungry people?
See, now we're getting into like semantics and shit.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like if we're getting into that, then the question becomes a lot more nuanced.
What if I'm a semantics guy? What if I like talking semantics?
What if semantics are useless?
Dude, semantics aren't useless. I think Erik brings up a good point.
Purposeful conversations.
I mean, we like to make up wars like our governmental leaders do, so why can't we? Like the war on hunger.
Or the war on stupidity.
Yeah. Good point.
So if I were to encompass, let's just say, the war on terrorism and the war on drugs, I'd probably end war itself, because there's probably a bunch of like trickle down impacts that occur. I understand that hunger is a very like massive link into war, food and water scarcity and eventually resources in general, but I think I'd probably end war because there's definitely a lot of trickle effects.
Yeah. That's a good point.
But then there's a flip side to that in my head. Like, if we end war, do we end some technological innovations that are gained through war, like new, R&D technologies? I think that's a pretty interesting thought in general just to have.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about the Cold War, you can think a lot of our technological advancements.
Yeah, making it to the moon. For instance.
It pushed us to get to the moon, implying we got to the moon. That's another conspiracy theory.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, world hunger, I feel like overall is going to have a much bigger effect. Comparing ending all hunger, comparing it to releasing people in jail for marijuana possession. Ultimately, I'd say ending world hunger is probably on net a much bigger and more beneficial impact. Not to downplay the importance
of course.
Of reforming drug policy in the United States specifically, but generally speaking, I feel like it's going to be much more of an impact.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Smart.
I definitely agree. So moving on to our second hypothetical of the evening, let's say that you find a book and you begin to read it only to discover that it is your life. You get to the point where you are right now at the present. Do you turn the next page knowing that you will not be able to change the event to come? Spencer.
Oh God. This is actually a really tough one for me because I have two basic fears in the world. One is not being in control. The second is not knowing something and knowing that there's something to know. So, like, this would drive me insane because, like, I would be so caught between those two sides. Honestly, ultimately, I think that I would end up turning the page because I like to know what's coming, and at least if I know what's coming, I can prepare myself for the impact of whatever is going to happen.
Dude,
How about you, Andrew?
I would just be naturally curious, so why not? Plus, I'm so used to turning pages in books, like, I'd probably just do it on accident.
Such a reader, Andrew.
Not
such
really.
an intellectual.
Not really.
I'm Andrew. I'm an intellectual.
My name's Andrew, and I'm an alcoholic.
What? Oh, okay.
That's what these meetings are actually about.
Yeah.
Our collective alcoholism.
Anyways, no, I'd probably do it. Like, I think I've always... This is really interesting and really personal. I've always, like, wanted to know when I was going to die, so I could, like, make preparations and, like, tell the right people that I love them. But, you know, in that case, yeah, I'd probably turn the page. I don't see anything wrong with that.
I'd turn the page, honestly, just out of natural curiosity, and also to confirm, like, the belief itself. What if the book was just a biography of me, and someone was just trying to troll me? If I read something that will happen in the future, it occurs. You know, hell, I might start reading the rest of the book, even though I don't like to read. And with that, I'll just understand more about myself. And then, like, what are the implications of that, right? It's like, oh, nothing really matters. I already know what's going to occur. Might as well try to enjoy every single minute of my life that I have. I mean, I'll ultimately know when I die, which is fine, but I'll try to intellectually or personally grow from all of the experiences.
So if you already know what's going to happen, does that mean, like, there's no way to get out of it? So, like, say it's something absolutely terrible, like bad enough to make you want to kill yourself. Does that just make it, like, guarantee that that attempt would not succeed, or, like, what are we doing here?
I like to think that if you've ever read, like, Greek plays, and where there's, like, the idea of fate or destiny, and I mean, you could even see it in those plays that no matter how the story of Oedipus Rex, right? No matter how hard they try to change fate, it's just impossible. So I like to think that it's like that. Like, unfortunately, in that case, you can't change it.
I don't think that the book would be bullet points like, Spencer wakes up today, Spencer eats food today, Spencer reads the book that's about his life today, he turns the page or not. I think that it would really be very vague, very subplotty, just like Andrew was talking about. I mean, the same example can be made within, like, the Shakespearean play Hamlet, right? It's Hamlet talks about how literally he knows that he's going to die, but there's nothing else that he can do, and he knows that it just has to occur. Death has to occur. Death is waiting, and death will ultimately will fall upon him.
Who writes your biography or book?
Me.
Do you have, like, a chosen author?
Oh,
the book that I pick up in, like, the middle of the woods?
Yeah. Like,
Sir Walter Isaacson.
Really?
Because, like, I want name recognition, bro.
Word.
I guess, like, some higher deity probably would write my book. Either that.
Do you have,
or
like, a favorite author?
Future self.
Ooh,
Yeah.
future self.
What if your future self is some higher deity?
I don't know what to say there, but
Insert
perhaps.
gif of
Dude, that's huge.
mind blown.
Yeah. So with that, we got a lot of news and conspiracy theories to cover this week. So we're going to move on to the news section. In this segment, we talk about international or domestic issues that are recently occurring. We have decided not to talk about the Trump administration this week, so we're going to be talking about the riots that are currently happening, and Spencer's going to kick that off.
So, in case you are living under a rock or just not paying any attention at all to news right now, which both are equally possible, I don't know your life. But recently in Charlottesville, there was a gathering of white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia, because they were protesting the government of Charlottesville tearing down a statue of Robert E. Lee, in addition to a couple other statues, I believe, of just Confederate monuments, essentially. And ultimately, that has turned rather violent at this point. Like, for example, just today there was a likely, like, this isn't confirmed yet, but it was likely a white supremacist crashed his car into a group of counter-protesters there who were there to protest against the neo-Nazi groups. And I'm not using the neo-Nazi term like lightly here. Like, they're legitimate neo-Nazis. Like, they're out there, they're chanting Nazi slogans. They're literally
wearing
chanting,
Hitler t-shirts.
Yeah, exactly. Wearing Hitler t-shirts, yelling stuff like Hitler did nothing wrong, yelling things like blood and soil, which is taken directly from Nazi rallies in the 1930s. Like, it's really rather frightening to watch, and I don't know how to adequately express my rage and frustration with everything that's going on. Like, it's just disturbing on such a fundamental level to be sitting here in 2017 seeing literal Ku Klux Klan rallies going around, and like people just trying to deny the existence of racism in this country, like even in light of these rallies.
So Spencer, it all spawns off of this people taking down statues, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, what were the statues there to begin with? Like, why were they like built and created? And
so the statues were there to commemorate the Confederacy of the United States, right? So like to commemorate a rebel group that tried to secede from the United States in order to assert their right to have slaves and own people.
Okay, so Virginia was like a state from the South.
Yeah, it's one of the states that seceded.
Yeah, seceded. Like, do we know which number it was to secede? Because I know North Carolina was like, South Carolina was one of the first to secede.
I believe, if I remember correctly, if my memory of the Civil War is serving me correctly, they were one of the later states, but not the last. If I have that correct.
Okay, so in my head, there's these people who are protesting and trying to get rid of these racist relics of these statues. So my question is, well, I mean,
there were people there protesting the removal of these statues. The removal of the statues. These neo-Nazi white supremacist groups.
There was counter protesting.
Yes.
Okay, I understand now. Sorry. So just so our listeners just fully understand like the severity and like the depth of this whole issue, what is the cultural significance that these statues play within the region? I mean, like, let's take the perspective of one of the people who are protesting the removal of these statues or the destruction of these statues, right? The reason that the statues are there definitely have some sort of cultural significance for the area, correct?
Yeah.
Correct, but, like, the people who are there protesting, honestly, a lot of them came from outside of the area, and, like, I think it's hard to make the argument that they're there to legitimately there just to protect heritage when they're actually chanting neo-Nazi slogans. Like, that's hate. I'm sorry. Like, there's no beating around the brush about it. Like, these groups are Nazis. They're KKK members. Like, they're the worst that our society has to offer.
Yeah. Like, I can agree that there is like some sort of historical value in those like statues existing, right? Like in terms of like, even at the very least, like teaching a lesson of like what happened there, and like I think there is value in that, in like statues or like historical landmarks existing in Europe, like Nazi Germany. You know, like I can maybe see like people protesting on the basis that it has historical value. We shouldn't be trying to like erase that from memory. But I think like in the sense that you're erasing from memory the like cultural ideas that underpinned what the statue and like what that person stood for and what the Confederate States of America stood for, then at that point the statue needs to come down. Just straight up, like, it needs to come down.
And people always like chant about like a common rallying cry for the people trying to protect the statues is heritage, not hate. But what they completely ignore, honestly, is that hate was at the core of the Confederate States of America, right? Like literally in their Declaration of Independence, they state that like one of their core founding principles is the principle that black people are not equal to white people. Like I'm sorry, like there's no, at that point, there's not really much to defend there in my mind. At this point, like it's really just like white supremacists who have used it as a flashpoint and a rallying cry for their cause, like trying to rally more people.
Do you think that, Andrew, the political polarization that is currently happening in America is fueling the fire to these racist ideologies, or just like the ideologies of the protesters in general?
Well, I would certainly say that, and you know, like unfortunately, that fuel was being like the previous administration, the Obama administration, also fueled that political climate. Like those people were just hidden, and I think like the way that the like alt-right has kind of come center stage, the Trump administration definitely creates a situation and like his election victory definitely creates a situation in which it's more viable for these people to be out in the open.
Well, literally today, David Duke came out and said that like this rally, quote unquote, like I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially what he said is that this rally is to fulfill Trump, like essentially Trump's campaign promises. And so it's like, it's really frustrating to me to sit here and watch this happen, and to sit and watch people try and deny that like, oh, these people aren't associated with Trump, like these people like don't get their power from Trump at all, because like they're literally claiming.
So Spencer, just for our listener, who is David Duke?
David Duke is the leader of a KKK group.
Okay.
Trump's election victory is literally a rallying cry for these people.
Like there's I'm not going to dance around it. Like yeah, it's literally what it is.
So what do you think the local government of Virginia can do in order to decrease this kind of problem from occurring again, or any sort of changes in general?
The Virginia
don't back down from taking down the statues. Like,
sure.
Like you, like with these types of people, like you can't give them any sort of victory, no matter what it is. Like,
yeah,
you have to just shut them down.
The Virginian governor came out and like decried the what's going on in Charlottesville, and he's saying like there's no room for this. And fortunately, a lot of people are like coming out about this. Not standing up for it. Like, unfortunately, your speech isn't always protected, and it shouldn't always be protected.
No, it shouldn't. Like yelling "blood and soil," a literal Nazi rallying cry, is honestly just like yelling like "blood and soil," which is literally just a Nazi rallying cry, like taken directly from Nazi rallies, as I said earlier. Like that should be, honestly, in my opinion, like that should be hate speech.
So do you think every single political person within the region should definitely denounce
absolutely, like honestly, I don't care where you are in the United States, if you are a significant political leader, like I think that you have an obligation to explicitly condemn these groups as what they are, as white supremacists, as neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
So what's the broader implication here?
The broader implication is that our country is headed down a very dangerous and very scary path, because we have a president in the White House who refuses to identify these people as who they are, and refuses to come out and say anything about them other than, oh, we decry violence on any side. You can't do that and remain honest with yourself about believing that you stand against hatred. Like, if there's hatred, call it out specifically. Like, you can't sit there and say, oh, well, there's violence on many sides, so we decry it all. Like, you have to specifically say, like, these guys are white supremacists, and they have no place in our culture today in America in 2017.
Yeah. Trump himself has an obligation to come out and specifically denounce these people that are doing this.
Which he did not.
Right. He didn't do that. In his statement, he did not, in name, call out white supremacists or white nationalists.
So did he have a statement about this issue?
He did. It was really weak. Basically, he said, I don't like violence. And it's like, no way.
Yeah,
really?
He denounced violence on either side, which is fine. Because neither side should be engaging in violence.
But the fact is, right now, like, the white supremacists are the one who are committing
So I have
violence.
A question. What if these white supremacists, these neo-Nazi people, protested in a non-violent way? Do you think that their message would have been heard better, would have been heard worse? What do you think the implications are of the neo-Nazis taking that kind of route?
The problem is, it doesn't matter. Like, if they are violent or non-violent, their message is still the same.
Their message is
still
violent,
like,
in my opinion.
it's still an inherently violent message.
Like, they're literal fascists, and a core piece, like a keystone of the fascist ideology, is that violence and war is actually a good thing for national identity. Like they went in, like, make no mistake about it, they didn't go in with the intent to peacefully protest. They went in to foment violence. They went in to stir things up, so to speak. Like, that's what they're there for.
Yeah. And one more thought about Trump. As soon as he denounces it in name, denounces these people and says, yeah, they support me, I don't support them, whatever they're supporting me for, I will try to fix, he no longer becomes a rallying cry for them.
Yeah, and he's had multiple opportunities to do that. During the campaign, David Duke came out in support of him, and he basically said, and he claimed to not know who David Duke was, even though if I remember correctly, like
They have ties.
yeah.
So do you think that if Donald Trump went out and denounced them and denounced all of white supremacy, and especially David Duke, there would be kind of a pedagogical shift or like a shift in thought with the entire race issue that's happening in America?
Probably not, but it would help. Like right now, standing idly by and not denouncing specifically what they're doing, it's legitimizing their argument.
Especially when he literally has an advisor in the White House by the name of Sebastian, I believe his first name is Sebastian
Gorka.
Yeah, Sebastian Gorka, who has literal ties to Nazi groups in one of the Eastern European countries. Literal ties to a neo-Nazi group. Has been pictured wearing Nazi memorabilia, like, and he's in the White House. Like, that's disturbing to me. Like,
well, during the protests, there was a person who rammed their car into the other, like, into the counter-protesters, right?
Correct.
They figured out who did that, correct?
Yeah, he's a 20-year-old from Ohio.
Yeah. Wow. How far is Ohio from Virginia? Quite a bit, right? Like 6,
I mean, it's like
7
doable.
hours.
that'd probably be about that. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I mean,
so they apprehended the person, and I assume they're going to charge him. My question here with this, he would probably be seen as a hero with the neo-Nazis, correct?
Absolutely.
So what's the implication of televising and really putting this person into the limelight as, you know, as like the media tries to characterize him as a villain, of course, but really he's idolized and even, I mean, at that scale, televised to the entire neo-Nazis.
Let's call it what it is. It's terrorism.
Yeah.
Point blank. It is terrorism by very definition. He is a terrorist. I don't know about your question in that, like, does he legitimize, like, their feelings? Or does he, like, become a rallying cry for them? Maybe. But he's going to be in jail, and he killed one person and hurt a lot more people.
So wouldn't he be seen as a martyr in a sense?
He could, but even those people, I'm not even sure that that's, like, what they wanted to happen. Like, he might have just been, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. Maybe.
So a few thoughts. One is it delegitimizes, because, like, one problem with this, and I can get more into this in a little bit, but, like, one problem with this whole movement is that they've spent years trying to foment, like, this identity of the alt-right around the old neo-Nazi agendas, right? And so they've been trying to turn it into, like, a legit, like, at least, like, a legitimized, in the view of the public, a legitimized political movement. And so, in my opinion, it is important that we identify these Nazis and we identify as the violent extremists they are, because then you have people who are, you know, like, fringe, who maybe have some, like, and, like, I'm not, like, trying to defend these people either and, like, call them, like, moderates per se, but, like, yeah, I guess, like, essentially, like, fringe supporters of this movement, if we can, like, because, like, the core supporters, they're going to stay, right? There's nothing that we can do at this point to get them to leave, except for in rare cases, obviously. But, like, there are going to be people on the fringes of that movement who will be frightened away by this type of violence and by being identified as a violent terrorist extremist, right? So that's why I think it's important to openly identify this person, because, sure, like, maybe it'll, like, present him as a martyr to, like, the small core group of this movement, but there are plenty of others who will be very turned off by that type of violence.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one thing to like identify with, like, an extremist racist group. Yeah. It's another thing to identify with the murderer.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like,
exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Like, like, and yeah, there's going to be people who just have no morals and are going to identify with those groups anyways. Yeah. And there are other ways of dealing with them. But yeah, like I said, like, we need to delegitimize this movement as benign, as peaceful in any way possible. Because, I mean, you have people online who are trying to put a nice face on neo-Nazism, and it's just disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, it's a terror group.
That needs to be ended.
Well, okay, maybe I'll take that back. I don't know that it's a terror group. That guy is a terrorist, though. Also, a helicopter went down. Did you see that? It was a police helicopter.
So, has there been more news about that? Because I saw that it happened, and I saw that, like, there was this headline about the helicopter being related to the rallies in some way, but I didn't see if that meant, like, it was just patrolling or
what was going on. A police helicopter monitoring the protests.
Okay.
And as far as I can tell, it seems to be some, like, malfunction. They're saying there's no foul play being a factor.
That's what I was guessing, but, like, Yeah.
But both the pilots died. That's
sad.
really a shame.
So
yeah, but I mean, can't even imagine. Like, that's just a weird headline to have come up, and a really scary one after you see one of somebody plowing into a group of people, injuring or killing 20 people.
So overall, a pretty tragic weekend.
Weird seeing this stuff in America.
Yeah. So with this whole, I guess, with the whole police issue that you just talked about, you think that there's going to be more tension related to police and citizen violence?
Absolutely. Like, I don't want to say it, but I think we can expect more protests like this in our near future, and I'm not entirely sure what the answer is. I don't know if the answer is to go out and oppose them as violently as happened in Charlottesville, basically make them afraid to show their faces. I don't know if the answer is to just like ignore them and not give them the publicity they seek. Like, I really wish that I had answers for that, but I honestly don't, and I've been thinking about it all day.
Well, I think that this triangle that we have, perspective of the issue. I mean, right now we're just looking through the lens of two white people, and we're not even looking through the lens of a person of color within America. Personally, I think that the entire issue is very scary, because it comes down to the roots of the issue of, like, literally political contention over something that you have no control over at all. Your ethnicity, your literally the skin of color that you have, the most identifiable part of you, because you are literally the skin that you are. One, it's your biggest organ, but two, like, it's so easy to just cast a blame onto someone else, the other, and there's nothing that people can do about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having a number of friends who are people of color, like makes me like scared for like their comfort and safety. Like, it's just a very scary issue.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it is a very, very frightening issue.
Especially when earlier this year the Trump administration defunded counterterrorism efforts dedicated to anti-white supremacism.
I think this whole white supremacy, neo-Nazi, fascism issue is all really tied together with a problem of identifying white terrorism, and there's just a fundamental lack of understanding, or there's blatant ignorance that's involved with the issue. But white terrorism exists. It's more prevalent than any other kind of terrorism, at least within the United States. I can't speak for other kinds of terrorism around the world, but fundamentally there's just a lack of foresight or identification. Thank you.
We need to call it what it is. Like it's time to stop calling people,
lone wolves.
Yeah, exactly. Like Dylan Roof, for example, went and shot up a black church. A lot of the media coverage surrounding him basically just identified him as like mentally disturbed, lone wolf shooter. We need to identify it as what it is. It is terrorism.
Tangent. Did you hear what happened with Dylan Roof?
That he got beat up.
He got beat up in prison, and the person who beat him up was a black guy.
Oh, and
he got so many donations that he's out on bail.
Like good for that guy. Like I like honestly, like I don't condone violence, but like when there's somebody that goes and shoots up a church, like I am all for beating the shit out of them.
Yeah, dude, I would have donated if I knew that I could donate.
Yeah, literally same. Honestly, though.
Now, with that whole situation that occurred with him in prison, would Dylan Roof be seen as a martyr for a white supremacist group?
He already is.
So what do we do to combat that? Combating martyrdom.
I don't think you can. Like the more people that go down, like in the sense that they go to jail, or like unfortunately we can't do anything about people who do drastic things like that and terrible things like that. Like if they're gonna end up like a martyr, like I just don't think that there's anything you can do about it.
Yeah, it's the unfortunate truth, but honestly, like I said, like I think that the best thing to do is to identify these people as what they are, terrorists, to put potential, disaffected youth who are looking for some sort of identity in whatever they can find, like to keep them from being turned into extremists themselves, right?
Spencer, I think you bring up a really great point about how we can minimize the effects of neo-Nazis and also delegitimize them at the same time. I mean, really coming down to like the central level, educating people, especially the youth culture, and also like focusing really hard on, I mean, specific populations that could be seen as, I mean, troublesome.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not gonna like to be clear, like Andrew said, we're never going to be. Unfortunately, the unfortunate truth is we're never going to be able to stop everybody from joining these type of extremist movements or whatnot, but it's very, very important that we work to limit their impact.
I feel as though during the Obama administration, these kind of acts and these issues weren't very heavily publicized or even seen at all during those 8 years. Do you think that having a person of color in the White House kind of put a cap on that, even though it wasn't, I mean, obviously, like, neo-Nazism and this kind of fascism was still around and prevalent during that time. Do you think that they really kind of went to the backing or the outcrop or were undercover during that time?
This is going to sound weird, but unfortunately, I think it actually made it worse. It kind of set the stage for, like, one, it set the stage for, like, a Trump presidency. And two, it's, like, added fuel to the fire of the alt-right, far extreme right argument, because Obama, he was a very polarizing president. The president we have now is a very polarizing president. You're going to push people to the very, very edge, and this is the kind of thing that happens. I do think ultimately having a person of color in office was obviously a good thing. It was great progress that we made, but I think unfortunately, at least for some people, it added fuel to the fire.
And honestly, I think a lot of that, to be quite partisan here, honestly, I think a lot of that can be attributed to a lot of the rhetoric that the political right directed at the Obama presidency, of trying to delegitimize him as, like, a true American. Like, the whole birther conspiracy, like, that Trump didn't necessarily start, but definitely fueled a lot of it. Like, a lot of that racism was fueled by the political right, either implicitly by refusing to acknowledge it, or explicitly by spreading those rumors and those lies.
Yeah.
And like, at a certain point, I think, like, they need to own up to that. They need to acknowledge, like, the people who are now on the right and trying to condemn the violence in Charlottesville this weekend, they need to own up to their actions in the past and acknowledge that they played a part in driving this polarization and extremism.
After that enticing news segment about Virginia, we're going to enter the conspiracy zone. In this segment, we talk about conspiracies that are typically out of the ordinary. We debate the validity of the conspiracy and see if it could potentially be true. This week, we're going to talk about the Bermuda Triangle. And by no means do we mean to offend anyone with this segment. It's just for fun and an interesting look at these subjects through an extraordinary perspective. So I'm going to kick this segment off by talking about the Bermuda Triangle and how it's like this really interesting piece of land within the Atlantic Ocean. So the Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, is a loosely defined region in the North Atlantic Ocean, where a number of aircrafts and ships are said to have disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The most reputable sources dismiss the idea as a complete mystery, but let's be honest, there are way too many coincidences that happen in this area. This triangle is basically a triangle that goes from a southern tip of Florida to the islands of Bermuda to Puerto Rico, which basically creates this triangle. So the coordinates are, if any of you are curious, it's 25 degrees north and 71 degrees west. There's a bunch of disappearances that are attributed to paranormal activities and extraterrestrial beings. Basically, the origins of the Bermuda Triangle suggest that there are disappearances that occurred in September 17th, 1950, with an article published by the Miami Herald by Edward Van Winklejones. Basically, it talked about how there's sea mysteries at our back door. It was a short article by George X that talked about basically creatures coming out from the ocean and taking ships into Davy Jones's locker. The person who talked about it talked usually about how they would enter white water and nothing seemed right. Compasses would go crazy and ships would basically go into a mist of white water and completely sink. A bunch of other people kind of piggybacked off of those ideas and wrote similar kind of stories, mythos, and even news articles that had to center around the Bermuda Triangle and the Devil's Triangle. There's some notable instances that occurred. Ellen Austin supposedly came across a direct ship placed on a board of a prize cruise and attempted to sail it to New York in 1981. According to the stories, the entire ship disappeared, the entire crew disappeared, and then eventually mysteriously reappeared a few years later with no crew, but the ship was just mysteriously sailing. There is another incident that talks that's the USS Cyclops, and basically the incident's it was a result of the single largest loss of life in the history of the U.S. Navy, not related to combat that occurred when basically this full-loaded USS carrier went missing without a trace of the crew, and a total of 309 people were lost. The ship departed on March 4th of 1918 from the island of Barbados. There is no strong evidence for any single theory that directly links the ship being crashed by a storm or of some paranormal activity or of some wartime enemy activity. Pretty much there's almost no evidence of any kind of structural failures. Evidences of planes disappearing and notable ships disappearing around the area. One other specific theory that deals with the Bermuda Triangle has to do with Amelia Earhart. Apparently, there's a theory that she flew over this region even though she wasn't, or she flew over the region because her certain coordinates got mixed up or something like that, and she succumbed to the tragedy of the Bermuda Triangle. That's the basic shell of the theory. So, does anyone want to kick us off with some interesting thoughts?
Atlantis.
So let's do it.
So I'm sure you've heard about Atlantis. Plato talked of it. It was the perfect civilization, the most advanced civilization that will ever exist, according to Plato. And so there's actually some pretty solid evidence in the region of the Bermuda Triangle for something being there. One of them is called the Bimini Road, which is like a rock formation on the bottom of the ocean. And the Bimini Road literally looks like some sort of road. Like, it's very linear. If you look at the rocks, they're kind of like brick-like. Some of them are. They're kind of seem to be placed in some sort of purposeful fashion, right? And so some people say it could have something to do with Atlantis. It could have something to do with something else. Radiocarbon dating dates it back to 3500 BC if they were to be placed there, which is really interesting.
So, if you remember our episode 2 that talked about Saddam Hussein's Stargate, do you think that there could be a connection with this Atlantis civilization that could possibly live there and a Stargate? You said that carbon dating dates it back to 3500 BC.
Yeah.
That's around the same time that the Anunnaki tribes obtained their mythical Stargate. Do you think that there's some sort of connection between a Stargate, Atlantis, and the Bermuda Triangle?
There certainly could be. I like the idea of Atlantis existing or was destroyed by some sort of cosmic event. Something happened there. And thus there's still radiological or electromagnetic radiation or some sort of anomaly occurring in the area of the Bermuda Triangle that's causing planes to go down, causing ships to sink, things like that. I mean, even if you take a look at Bimini Road, it's spelled Bimini road. Those pictures, I mean, they look pretty solid. It's very interesting. It looks deliberate. It looks real. Could be evidence for Atlantis. Could be evidence for what's really going on at the Bermuda Triangle. Makes me not super skeptical about it.
Oh, and I was just gonna say, even if you just ignore the Atlantis thing, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of legends of lost civilizations underneath the sea. So So even just setting aside the Atlantis conspiracy or Atlantis myth, this could still point to some sort of lost city or lost civilization that has fallen beneath the waves many, many years ago.
How about aliens?
Yes.
See, I already talked about aliens. Atlantis.
So you're saying that Atlantis is an alien civilization?
I don't know that it's like an alien civilization, but I do think that it could be like a human alien civilization. Could
Human
be like,
hybrid.
Could be. Could have been built with alien help. Could have been like an alien stronghold or something. I don't know. Hence why it disappeared. Aliens are pretty good at disappearing.
Yeah, and I will say that like a lot of like the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. So taking the most cynical view on the Bermuda Triangle, statistically it's not more likely for something to disappear there. But to me, what's notable about the Bermuda Triangle is not like, you know, like the number of disappearances or like the rate of disappearances. It's the nature of the disappearances, right? Mm-hmm. It's that the disappearances are so unnatural and what's the word for it? Inexplicable. Mm-hmm. A lot of them, that makes it remarkable to me. So I mean, like, I don't think that's like a very good argument against saying like there's not statistically more disappearances in the area.
Sure.
So there's another area within the globe that's very similar in nature, and it's called the Dragon's Triangle. And this Dragon Triangle is in the Pacific, and it is referred often as the Pacific Bermuda Triangle. Basically, it's a region in the Pacific around the Miyake Islands, about 100 kilometers south of Tokyo, and there's a lot of pop culture conspiracies related to this triangle. Mm-hmm. If we think about a Stargate specific ideology that, you know, a plane in the Bermuda Triangle in the Atlantic can transfer over to the Pacific Bermuda Triangle or the Dragon's Triangle.
Yeah.
Or, you know, either of these sites could be locations for alien travel or interdimensional travel in general.
Sure.
So just like Spencer said, there is definitely no higher rate of craft disappearance within the region. A lot of the mysterious occurrences are, you know, usually wives' tales or things like that. There's a lot of popularity behind it. I mean, there's obviously a lot of hype behind it, and a lot of people kind of play it up as an issue that's bigger than it actually is. Mm-hmm. There's really honestly no higher level of disappearances within the entire area, and it's just become like a folklore.
Dude, shut up. It's Atlantis.
I mean,
telling you.
Probably. So what would we rate this theory as? What do you give it a rating, Andrew?
Dude, 10 out of 10, man.
10 out of 10?
This is 10 out of 10.
10 points.
This is in my history book when I write it. This totally happens. Dude, crazy stuff happens, man.
How about you, Spencer?
I'm giving it like a 5 out of 7.
5 out of 7?
You know, like I could buy into it, but at the same time, like with how often there are unexplained disappearances at sea in general, I'm not sure that, like, you know, Bermuda Triangle deserves its status as uniquely interesting.
Dude.
And I think that there's just something interesting about, like, disappearances at sea in general. Also, they really scare me because I hate the ocean.
I'll give this theory 1 Cthulhu out of 7 unicorns. I think that it really... I mean, when it comes down to it, the ocean is, like, a really weird, mysterious place. Anything can happen. Disappearances can occur. But, you know, just like any other location in the ocean.
We're talking about the Bermuda Triangle, and you wait until now to drop Cthulhu? Why haven't we been talking Cthulhu the whole time?
Because in the Lovecraftian pantheon of gods, Cthulhu is actually, like, further south, dude, in the Pacific Ocean.
Dude.
So, please.
He travels up.
Please check.
Sometimes
he travels around the Americas just to go to the Atlantic Ocean.
It is his summer home. He does not utilize the Panama Canal.
Would it not be his winter home?
It could also be his winter home.
Touché.
Because I feel like the Atlantic Ocean's a little bit colder, a little bit harsher.
Actually, depends on the part. That specific part of the Atlantic Ocean, though, tends to be warmer because of the Gulf Stream.
Oh,
interesting.
There it is.
Interesting.
So that could be another explanation, actually, for, like, shifting waters and whatnot, is you have the Gulf Stream coming right through there, so that has a tendency to disrupt.
Have rogue waves that are waves that reach 100 feet.
Yeah, rogue waves, hurricanes, all kinds of stuff like that.
Okay,
that's pretty interesting.
So ultimately, I think it's mostly built off of hype, but I do think it's very interesting the number of unexplained
Well, thank you both for that interesting discussion on the recent Virginia protests and also the interesting look on the Bermuda Triangle and also the Dragon's Triangle. Remember that if you like us, feel free to give us a 5-star, a favorite, a like, or whatever you need to show your appreciation. And of course, if you want to talk to us about a specific conspiracy or domestic or international issue, feel free to comment telling us what you want us to talk about. The inspiration for this week comes from a person named Larry Smith. Thanks, Larry, for this lit idea. Special shout out to, quote, "My name is Nico," who gave us our first 5-star review on iTunes. We really do love the support and really do love it when you give us comments and also give us 5 stars, because we're, just doing this for fun, and also we love the constructive criticism. But give us a 5 stars even if we suck. Remember to comment.
AKA, we are desperate for your feedback, please.
Remember to
I need validation.
Remember to comment on the podcast telling us what you think about the topic, or tell us how awesome or awful we are. Either way, it is going to, make me cry. Don't forget to subscribe so you stay up to date on all the interesting conspiracy and newsworthy events. You can find us on SoundCloud, Apple's Podcasts, and YouTube at Outside the Box. Do y'all want to plug your social media?
Check me out at Thought Cheetos. That is THOT_Cheetos on Twitter. And also you can find me at Frogs Are People Too on Twitch.tv. I'll mostly be streaming Destiny.
Dude, your stream's so lit. Snapchat me, Ahole, that's AHULL. Also Instagram, Thotimus Prime. You already know. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay. You can find me on Snapchat at Erik Perez 18. Oh, and a little bit just before we close up, we're the first podcast on Apple Podcast. If you look us up, we're the first episode. Our episode 1 is it's pretty good. So we're hitting the waves. We're ruffling some feathers.
Heyo.
The only conspiracy podcast that exists. Don't at me on that. Anyway, see you next week. And lastly, stay outside
the box.
Stay swifty, friends.